Esther Hartwell's hands trembled as she tore at the high collar choking her neck, the fabric soaked through with sweat and shame. 2 days in the wilderness had brought her here to the door of a man the town called cursed. When it swung open, his eyes swept over her fever-bright face, then dropped to the inflamed skin she'd spent years hiding.
Good.
"Show me your
Now watch
body,"
closely. We
he
grind
said,
the herbs
and she
until they are a
flinched,
fine
waiting for the
powder.
disgust
This is
she knew would come. But Dr. Joshua Whitman didn't look away. He looked closer. Before we begin this journey of healing and redemption, please subscribe to our channel and follow Esther's story to the very end. Comment below with the city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story of hope can travel. Now let's step into the Wyoming mountains where shame meets mercy, and where one woman's desperate climb changes 2 lives forever. The morning Esther Hartwell decided to disappear, she didn't tell anyone. Not Mrs. Carmichael at the boarding house, who'd been whispering about her condition for months. Not Reverend Paulson, who'd suggested her affliction was God's judgment. And certainly not Dr. Pemberton, who'd looked at her inflamed skin and called it moral weakness made visible. She packed a cloth bag and walked out of Timber Creek before dawn. The rash had started 3 years ago. Small patches at first, easy to hide. Then it spread up her neck, down her back, across her stomach. The itching was torture, but worse was the burning that came in waves, like her skin was keeping score of every cruel word. Dr. Pemberton had been her last hope. She'd saved for months to afford his consultation. He'd barely looked at her. Mrs. Hartwell. He'd said she'd never married, but he used the title like an insult. "This condition is psychosomatic. Your body is punishing you for your excesses." His eyes had traveled over her deliberately. "Lose weight. Find contentment. Stop wallowing in self-pity. The rash will clear once you address the root cause, your lack of discipline." She'd paid his $5 fee and walked out vision swimming. That night, Martha Yates knocked on her door. "Essie Pemberton's a snake with a diploma." Martha pressed a folded paper into her hand. "There's another doctor. Lives on Copper Mountain 2 days northeast. They call him the ghost doctor, doesn't come to town, doesn't advertise. But people say he heals folks, others give up on." Esther unfolded the paper. A rough map. A single name. Dr. Joshua Whitman. "Why tell me this?" "Because you deserve better. My sister had a skin condition that covered her whole body. 3 doctors said hopeless. Josh Whitman cured her in 2 months. Josh used to be an army surgeon. Something happened during the war. Now he only treats people who find him." Martha's smile was sad. Some folks can't stomach how cruel people can be. Now, 36 hours later, Esther understood cruelty came in many forms. The mountain trail was brutal. Her legs burned, her lungs screamed. The canteen had run dry 4 hours ago, and June's sun beat down mercilessly. The rash had worsened. Sweat set her skin aflame. She'd torn off her outer dress hours back, walking in just her chemise and skirt. No one to see. Just trees and rocks, and endless climbing. She should have been afraid alone in wilderness, no weapon, no supplies. But fear required energy she didn't have. Only the animal need to keep moving. To reach the top. To find the man who might look without disgust. Or die trying. Either seemed acceptable now. Mid-afternoon of the second day, something rustled in the brush ahead. Esther froze. A massive shape moved between the pines. Dark fur. Hunched shoulders. Bare. Her breath stopped. The animal lifted its head, testing the wind. She'd heard the stories. Make yourself big, make noise, back away slowly. But her legs wouldn't move. Her voice wouldn't come. The bear took a step toward her. Then another. Esther's hand found a rock. Useless. Pathetic. But her fingers closed around it anyway. The bear huffed, then turned and lumbered away into the trees. She collapsed against a pine trunk, shaking so hard her teeth rattled. 5 minutes passed before she could stand. 10 before she could walk. Keep moving. That was all. Keep moving. The sun was descending when she saw it, a cabin in a clearing, smoke rising from a chimney. A garden beside it, neat rows of green. Someone lived here. Someone who planted things. Her legs gave out on the last 100 yards. She crawled the rest, palms bloody on rock. When she reached the wooden steps, she couldn't climb them. Just collapsed and raised her fist to knock, knowing she'd never reach it. "Help," she whispered. "Please." The door opened. She looked up at the man silhouetted there. Tall, broad-shouldered, dark hair silvered at the temples. Beard covering his jaw. Simple homespun shirt sleeves rolled to reveal scarred forearms. His eyes were gray, storm gray. When they landed on her, they didn't widen or narrow. They assessed. "You're fevered. How long walking?" 2 days. Her voice cracked. "Are you Dr. Whitman?" "Josh." He descended in 2 strides and knelt, hand to her forehead, fingers checking her pulse. "Clinical. Professional. Severely dehydrated. Can you stand?" "No." He slipped one arm under her knees, the other behind her back, and lifted her. "I'm too heavy," she said automatically. "You're dehydrated and exhausted. I've carried wounded soldiers twice your size through mud and blood. You're fine." Something cracked in her chest. He carried her inside and set her in a chair near the fire. Immediately moved to pour water into a tin cup. "Slow sips. Too fast and you'll vomit." The water was cool, clean. She wanted to gulp it, but obeyed, taking small mouthfuls while he watched. 3 cups before he seemed satisfied. "Now tell me why you're here." The directness caught her off guard. No pleasantries, just the question that mattered. "I have a skin condition. No one in town could help. Someone said you might." "Show me." Her hands froze. "What?" "Show me your body." His tone was professional, necessary. "I need to see the affected areas to diagnose." Years of shame didn't disappear with logic. Her hands trembled on the buttons. "Wait." He stood, dragged a folding screen to create a partition. "Medical gown behind the screen. Remove everything underneath. I need to see all affected skin. When ready, sit on the examination table." He turned his back, laying out instruments. Esther moved behind the screen on shaking legs. The gown was soft cotton tied in back. She stripped off her filthy clothes and slipped it on her skin, screaming at even gentle fabric. "Lie down on your back." She climbed onto the padded table, heart hammering. This was it. The moment he'd see everything. Josh lit 2 oil lamps and began. His hands were warm, gentle, methodical. He examined her face, tilting her head to see her neck. Then her arms, turning them carefully. Lifted the gown to check her stomach, ribs, back, all with clinical detachment. He didn't gasp, didn't flinch, didn't make one sound of disgust. Instead, he asked questions. "When did this start?" 3 years ago, small patches. "Itch or burn?" "Both. Burning's worse." "Constant or waves?" "Waves. Worse when I'm stressed." "Any patterns?" "Foods, environments." Her throat tightened. No doctor had ever asked these questions. "Worse after people say cruel things. After difficult days. I know that sounds... It sounds like your body's been keeping score of every wound your heart's taken." His hand stilled on her shoulder, gray eyes meeting hers. "And it's rebelling." The tears came hot and sudden. She turned away. "I'm sorry, I don't know why." "Because someone finally believes you." His voice was quiet, firm. "You can sit up. I've seen enough." She pushed upright, wiping her face with trembling hands. He moved to his shelves, selecting jars, mixing something in a ceramic bowl. "What Pemberton told you was cruel and wrong. This is stress-induced dermatitis. Your body's having an inflammatory response triggered by chronic psychological trauma." "So it is in my head?" "No." He turned to face her. "It's in your nervous system. There's a difference. Your mind and body are connected. When one suffers, the other responds. You haven't failed your body. Your body's been trying desperately to protect you from an environment that's been poisoning you." Esther stared. The town made me sick. Cruelty has consequences. You've been absorbing those consequences in your skin because you had nowhere else to put them. He approached with a pale green salve that smelled of mint and flowers. This will help inflammation and pain, but real healing takes time, and it requires you to stop carrying other people's cruelty as your own shame. I don't know how. Lucky for you, I do. He worked methodically, applying salve to every affected area while explaining comfrey for inflammation, calendula for healing, lavender for pain. His touch remained professional throughout. Careful, respectful. When he finished, he helped her into a clean nightgown from a trunk. You'll sleep in the bed. I'll take the floor. I can't take your... You're a patient. Patients get the bed. That's the rule. He ladled soup into a bowl and brought it to her. Eat, then sleep. We'll talk more in the morning. The soup was warm, savory. Esther ate slowly, watching as Josh made himself a bedroll near the fireplace with practiced efficiency. Why did you leave the army? His hands stilled on the blanket. Long silence. Got tired of being ordered to save some men while letting others die. War makes you choose. Medicine shouldn't. So I came here where I could treat whoever needed it without someone telling me who was worth saving. Does anyone from town ever come? Sometimes. The ones other doctors give up on. His jaw tightened. Martha's sister. A ranch hand with a leg that should have been amputated. A child with seizures everyone called possessed. He paused. Last time someone from town came uninvited, they tried to burn me out. Said I was practicing devil's medicine. Sheriff stopped them, but barely. Towns like Timber Creek mistake suffering for sin. I prefer the mountain. Trees don't judge. Esther set down her empty bowl. But you get lonely. He glanced at her, something unreadable in his expression. Less than you'd think. Her eyelids grew heavy. Exhaustion medicine, first real food in days, pulling her toward sleep. Thank you, she whispered, for not looking at me like I'm broken. His expression softened. You're not broken, Esther. You're wounded. There's a difference. Broken can't be fixed. Wounded heals. Will I heal? Yes. No hesitation. But healing takes time, patience, and someone who believes it's possible. As Esther sank into clean sheets, her skin already quieting under the salve's touch, she realized something remarkable. For the first time in 3 years, she felt safe. But just as sleep began to claim her, a sound drifted up from far down the mountain. Horses. Multiple riders. Her eyes flew open. Josh was already at the window, pulling back the curtain just enough to see out. His shoulders had gone rigid. Josh. He let the curtain fall and turned to her. His face was calm, but something dangerous flickered in those gray eyes. Sleep, Esther. Whatever comes, we'll deal with it in the morning. What's coming? He moved back to his bedroll, but she noticed he placed his rifle within arm's reach, something he hadn't done before. Probably nothing. Sound carries strange on this mountain at night. But they both heard the lie. Somewhere below in the darkness between pines, riders were climbing, and Esther knew with cold certainty that Timber Creek had noticed her absence, and decided to follow. The riders didn't come that night. Esther woke to sunlight streaming through the cabin window and the smell of coffee boiling over the fire. Her body ached in places she didn't know could ache, but the burning in her skin had quieted to a dull warmth. She touched her arm carefully. The angry red patches felt smoother, less inflamed. Josh was at the table grinding something in a mortar with steady, rhythmic motions. He didn't look up when she stirred. There's water in the basin if you want to wash. Coffee's ready. We've got about 2 hours before they arrive. Esther sat up slowly. They're really coming? 3 riders, stopped about a mile down around midnight, made camp. They'll reach us mid-morning. He set down the pestle and finally looked at her. You need to decide something, Esther. Do you want to go back with them, or do you want to stay? I don't want to go back. Then you won't. He returned to his grinding. But you should know what staying means. They'll call you a whore for being up here alone with me. They'll say I've corrupted you or kidnapped you or worse. And when that doesn't work, they'll try other methods. What methods? Fear, shame, legal threats, maybe violence if they're feeling righteous enough. His jaw tightened. I've been through this twice before. Once with a married woman whose husband beat her, she came up here bleeding from her ears. He brought the sheriff, claimed I'd stolen his property. Second time was a young man everyone said was slow in the head. Turned out, he just couldn't hear properly. His family wanted him locked away. I fixed his hearing, and they tried to have me arrested for practicing medicine without proper credentials. What happened? The woman went back to her husband because she had 3 children and nowhere else to go. The young man stayed with me for 6 months, then moved to Denver where nobody knew him. Josh poured coffee into 2 tin cups. Point is, Timber Creek doesn't like it when I prove them wrong. Makes them look foolish. And they especially don't like it when their victims escape. Esther took the cup he offered, wrapping both hands around its warmth. I'm not going back. Good. He pulled bread from a covered basket and set it between them. Then eat. You'll need your strength. And after breakfast I'm going to teach you how to make that salve yourself. Why? Because healing's not something you receive once and then you're done. It's something you do, every day, until one day you realize you don't need to anymore. He broke off a piece of bread and handed it to her. And because if you're staying, you're not staying as a patient, you're staying as a student. They ate in silence for a few minutes. The bread was dense, nutty spread, with something that tasted like honey and herbs. Josh, last night you said someone tried to burn you out. His hand stilled on his cup. 3 years ago, group of men from town led by Reverend Paulson, same one who told you your rash was God's judgment, I'd wager. They rode up here with torches and Bibles, said I was doing Satan's work, claimed I'd healed a woman by unnatural means. What did you do? Stood on that porch with my rifle and asked them which commandment permitted murder in God's name. That confused them long enough for Sheriff Coleman to arrive. He's not a bad man, Coleman. Knows the difference between justice and a mob. He sent them home. Josh's expression darkened. But Paulson swore he'd see me driven off this mountain one way or another. Said as long as I was up here offering false hope, people would keep sinning by seeking help outside the church. False hope, Esther repeated bitterly. Is that what I'm full of now? No, you're full of breakfast and medicine. Hope's just a side effect. He stood and began clearing the dishes. Come on, time for your first lesson. He led her to the shelves where dozens of jars sat in neat rows, each labeled in precise handwriting. Esther recognized some lavender chamomile mint, but others were unfamiliar. Comfrey, arnica, calendula, devil's claw. The salve I used last night has 7 ingredients, Josh said, pulling down 4 jars. Each one serves a purpose. Comfrey reduces inflammation. Calendula promotes new skin growth. Lavender eases pain and helps you sleep. Plantain draws out toxins. He set a mortar and pestle in front of her. You're going to make today's batch. I don't know how. That's why I'm teaching you. He measured out dried comfrey leaves and dropped them into the mortar. Start with this. Grind it slow, not hard. Slow. You're coaxing the plant to give up its medicine, not beating it into submission. Esther picked up the pestle awkwardly. She pressed down and twisted. The leaves crackled, but didn't break properly. Slower, Josh said. Circular motions. Let the weight of the pestle do the work. She adjusted her grip and tried again. This time the leaves began to crumble, releasing a faint green scent. Better. Keep going until it's powder. I'll prepare the oil base. They worked side by side in comfortable silence. Josh heated a mixture of olive oil and beeswax over low flame, while Esther ground each herb in turn, following his quiet instructions. The repetitive motion was soothing, circular, steady, purposeful. "My mother taught me to grind corn like this," Esther said softly. "Before she died, she'd say the same thing slow, let the grain give what it wants." Smart woman. She was. Everyone loved her. She was round and soft and always smiling, and nobody ever called her fat or disgusting. Then she got sick, and within a year, she was thin as paper. People said she looked beautiful right before she died. Esther's hand stilled on the pestle. I remember thinking that was the cruelest thing I'd ever heard, that she had to waste away before they'd call her beautiful. Josh was quiet for a moment. "How old were you?" 14. Old enough to understand that I looked like her, that I'd never be thin enough to be acceptable unless I was dying. She resumed grinding harder now. "The rash started the year I turned 23, right after Pastor Michaels gave a sermon about gluttony being a sin and looked straight at me the entire time." "Slow," Josh reminded gently. "You're beating it now." She loosened her grip, ashamed. "Sorry." "Don't apologize, just notice. Your body tenses when you remember pain, shoulders up, jaw tight. The plant feels that. Everything feels everything, Esther. That's what most people don't understand about healing. It's not just about the right medicine. It's about the hands that make it and the spirit they carry." He added her powdered herbs to the warm oil, stirring slowly. The mixture turned a pale green and filled the cabin with an earthy, clean scent. "We let this infuse for 30 minutes, strain. It add the beeswax to thicken it, then pour it into jars. Tomorrow you'll do the whole process yourself." "What if I do it wrong?" "Then we'll do it again until you do it right. That's how learning works." He set the pot aside to steep and turned to face her fully. "You're not a burden here, Esther. And you're not a patient I'm trying to fix and send away. If you stay as an equal. I'll teach you everything I know about medicine, about plants, about how bodies heal, and in return, you help me with the work that needs doing. Cooking, cleaning, tending the garden, fair trade. Why would you do that? Because I'm tired of being alone, and because you deserve a chance to become someone other than what Timber Creek decided you were." He poured fresh coffee for them both. "And maybe because I see something in you that you don't see yet." "What's that?" "Strength. Real strength, not the kind that comes from never breaking, but the kind that comes from breaking and choosing to get back up anyway. You walked 2 days through wilderness with no guarantee I'd even be here. You faced down a bear with nothing but a rock. You didn't give up. That's not weakness, Esther. That's steel wrapped in soft skin." Before she could respond, the sound of horses drifted through the open window. Josh's expression didn't change, but his body language shifted, weight, balanced, shoulders squared. He moved to the door and stepped out onto the porch. Esther followed on shaking legs. 3 riders emerged from the tree line into the clearing. She recognized them immediately. Sheriff Coleman led a weathered man in his 50s with a steel-gray mustache and tired eyes. Behind him rode Deputy Marshal Webb Young, an eager hand resting on his holstered pistol. And beside Webb, sitting straight-backed on a black gelding, was Reverend Paulson. The Reverend's face was sharp, clean-shaven, with eyes like chips of ice. He wore black from collar to boots, and he carried a leather-bound Bible in one hand like a weapon. They reined in 20 feet from the porch. "Dr. Whitman," Coleman said, tipping his hat. "Morning." "Sheriff?" "We're looking for a woman, Esther Hartwell. Left Timber Creek 2 days back without a word. Mrs. Carmichael's worried sick." "Mrs. Carmichael's a busybody who makes her living from other people's misery," Josh replied evenly. "But yes, Miss Hartwell is here. She came seeking medical treatment." Paulson's eyes found Esther and his lip curled. "Medical treatment. Is that what we're calling sin these days?" "Careful, Reverend," Josh said quietly. "Bearing false witness is also a sin, if I recall correctly." "There's nothing false about what I see. A woman of questionable morals hiding in the wilderness, with a man of questionable character. The math is simple. Then your arithmetic needs work. Josh descended one step, putting himself between Paulson and Esther. Miss Hartwell arrived severely dehydrated and suffering from acute dermatitis. I treated her wounds, gave her food and shelter, and conducted myself with complete professional propriety. If you're here to collect her, you're welcome to ask her yourself if she wants to go back. Coleman shifted in his saddle. Miss Hartwell, you up here of your own free will? Esther's throat was dry, but she forced the words out. Yes, Sheriff. I came because Dr. Pemberton refused to treat me. Dr. Whitman has been nothing but kind and respectful. Respectful? Paulson spat. You've been alone with this man for 2 days, unchaperoned, unmarried. Your reputation is destroyed, girl. The only question is whether you were foolish enough to ruin yourself willingly, or whether he corrupted you. Nobody corrupted anyone, Esther said, and was surprised by the steadiness in her voice. I came here sick and desperate. He healed me, that's all. Healed you? Paulson swung down from his horse Bible, clutched tight. Let me see these miraculous healings. No, Josh said flatly. I'm not asking you, devil doctor. I'm asking her. Paulson's eyes bored into Esther. If you've truly been healed, show us. Prove this man hasn't been filling your head with false hope and your body with ungodly substances. Esther's hands went instinctively to her collar. Every instinct screamed to refuse to hide to protect herself from their judgment. But then she remembered Josh's words. You're not broken. You're wounded. And wounded heals. She stepped forward past Josh down the porch steps until she stood 5 feet from Paulson. Then she unbuttoned her collar and pulled it open, exposing her neck. The skin there, which 3 days ago had been angry red and weeping, was now pale pink and smooth. Still tender, still healing, but undeniably better. She rolled up her sleeves. Her arms told the same story. Does this look like corruption to you, Reverend, or does it look like healing? Paulson stared. His jaw worked, but no words came. Coleman cleared his throat. Well, that seems clear enough. Miss Hartwell's been treated and is recovering. If she chooses to stay for continued care, that's her right as a free citizen. Her right? Paulson found his voice again sharp with fury. She has no rights. She's an unmarried woman living in sin with a man who practices medicine without proper authority. This is an abomination before God. This is a doctor treating a patient, Josh said coldly. Same as any physician in any town. The only difference is, I don't charge her a week's wages to tell her she's disgusting. You charge her something far worse, her immortal soul. My soul is my own business, Esther said, surprised by her own boldness. And so is my body. Dr. Pemberton told me my illness was punishment for being fat. He told me to starve myself and pray harder. Dr. Whitman told me my body was responding to trauma and taught me how to make the medicine that's healing me. Which one of them sounds more like God's work to you? Paulson's face went purple. You blasphemous! That's enough. Coleman's voice cut through like a blade. Reverend, you've seen the woman's well and staying by choice. We've got no cause to interfere. Let's ride. I won't stand by while this man corrupts the souls of... You'll stand by or you'll ride back alone. Coleman's hand moved to rest on his own pistol, not threatening, just present. Your choice. For a long moment, Paulson stood rigid, trembling with rage. Then he spun on his heel, mounted his horse with jerky movements, and yanked the reins hard. This isn't over, Whitman. The righteous will not permit this den of iniquity to stand. The righteous, Josh said quietly, would be more concerned with healing the sick than maintaining their own sense of superiority. But you do what you need to do, Reverend. I'll be right here. Paulson kicked his horse and galloped back toward the tree line. Webb followed quickly, looking uncomfortable. Coleman lingered a moment longer. His eyes moved between Josh and Esther, assessing. You're playing a dangerous game, both of you. Paulson's got influence in town. He'll make trouble. He's been making trouble for 3 years, Josh replied. I'm still here. Fair point. Coleman touched his hat brim. Miss Hartwell, if you need anything, if circumstances change, you send word. Understood. Yes, Sheriff. Thank you. He rode away at a steady pace, not rushed, but not lingering either. When the sound of hooves faded completely, Esther's legs gave out. She sat down hard on the porch steps, shaking. Josh sat beside her, not touching, just present. You did well. I showed them my skin, in front of 3 men. I never... She pressed her hands to her face. I've spent 3 years hiding it from everyone, and I just... showed them. You stood your ground. That's different than exposing yourself. You showed them evidence that they were wrong about you, about me, about what healing looks like. That took courage. It took stupidity. Now Paulson will tell the whole town I'm living up here in sin. He was going to do that anyway. At least now some people will have seen proof that you're actually healing. Josh stood and offered his hand. Come on, the salve needs straining. She let him pull her up, though her legs still felt unsteady. They went back inside where the green-tinted oil was waiting. Josh showed her how to pour it through cheesecloth, pressing gently to extract every drop without forcing plant matter through. Then he melted beeswax into the oil until the mixture thickened to the right consistency. We'll pour it into jars and let it cool overnight. Tomorrow morning you'll apply it yourself. I'll tell you how, but you'll do the work. Your hands, your healing. What if Paulson comes back? Then we'll deal with it. But Esther... He waited until she met his eyes. You can't live your life afraid of what cruel people might do. They've already taken 3 years from you. Don't give them any more. She nodded, not trusting her voice. They worked together through the afternoon, straining salve, washing bandages, organizing the medicine shelves. Josh explained each herb's properties as they worked, testing her memory, correcting gently when she mixed up comfrey and calendula. The difference matters. Comfrey's powerful, but shouldn't be used on deep wounds. It heals skin faster than underlying tissue can trap infection. Calendula's gentler, safer for everything. You have to know not just what heals, but when and how. As evening approached, Josh started preparing dinner beans, salt pork, wild onions from the garden. Esther moved automatically to help chopping vegetables while he worked the fire. You don't have to, he started. You said fair trade. You teach me medicine, I help with the work. This is the work. A smile tugged at his mouth. Fair enough. They ate as the sun set, painting the clearing in gold and amber. For the first time since arriving, Esther felt her shoulders relax. The fear that had gripped her since hearing the horses that morning was loosening. Josh. Earlier you said you've been alone up here 3 years. Don't you ever want more what? I don't know. Conversation? Friendship? Someone to share this with. She gestured around the cabin. It's beautiful up here, but it seems lonely. He was quiet for a long moment, staring into his coffee. I was married once, before the war. Esther's breath caught. What happened? I was young, stupid, thought I could save the world with a scalpel and good intentions, enlisted as a surgeon, told Caroline I'd be back in a year. His jaw tightened. 3 years later I came home to an empty house. She'd remarried, thought I was dead. Letter from the army saying I'd been killed at Shiloh never got corrected. By the time I returned, she had a new husband, a baby on the way, a whole new life. Josh, I'm so sorry. Don't be. She did what she had to do. Can't blame a woman for not waiting forever for a ghost. He set down his cup. But after that, I couldn't stomach being in cities anymore. Too many people, too many lies, too much pretending. The army was the same politics and death dressed up as honor. So I came here, built this place, and decided I'd rather be lonely and honest than surrounded and pretending. Until Martha's sister came. Until patients started finding me, yes. Turns out healing people is what I'm for, and I can do that up here without compromising what I believe in. He looked at her directly. But you're right. It has been lonely. 3 years is a long time to hear only your own voice. Then I'm glad I came, even if I brought trouble with me. Trouble was already here. You just gave it a face. He stood and began clearing dishes. Get some rest. Tomorrow we'll work on making that salve from start to finish. And I'll teach you about poultices, different animals, same basic principle. That night, lying in the bed that was starting to feel familiar, Esther listened to Josh's steady breathing from his bedroll across the room. For the first time in years, she didn't feel ashamed of taking up space. She felt like she was finally learning what it meant to exist without apology. And tomorrow, she'd get up and learn more about herbs and healing, about strength and survival, about how broken things could slowly become whole again. Outside the mountain stood guard in darkness, and somewhere far below, Timber Creek whispered with rumors about the fat girl who'd run away to live in sin. But up here in a cabin that smelled of medicine and pine, Esther Hartwell was beginning to understand that their opinions had never been truth. They'd only been noise, and she was finally learning to stop listening. 2 weeks passed before the second confrontation came, and by then, Esther had changed in ways she was only beginning to recognize. Her hands no longer trembled when she ground herbs. She could identify chamomile from feverfew. By scent alone knew that willow bark tea dulled pain, but shouldn't be given to anyone with stomach ailments. Understood the difference between a poultice that drew infection and a salve that sealed wounds. Josh taught her, relentlessly testing her knowledge while they worked, correcting mistakes before they became dangerous. Medicine isn't guessing, he'd say when she hesitated over which jar to choose. It's knowing. And if you don't know, you ask or you wait. Never gamble with someone's life because you're too proud to admit ignorance. Her skin continued healing. The angry red patches faded to pink, then to pale cream that matched the rest of her. The burning stopped entirely. The itching became occasional rather than constant. Each morning she applied the salve herself. Now her own hands spreading medicine she'd made, and each morning she marveled at how foreign it felt to touch her own body without shame. But the most significant change was harder to name. It lived in the way she moved through the cabin, no longer apologizing for taking up space, no longer flinching when Josh's path brought him close to hers. It lived in her voice, which had grown steadier, louder, more willing to ask questions and offer opinions. It lived in the moments when she caught her reflection in the water basin and didn't immediately look away. Josh noticed. He didn't comment directly, but she saw approval in the slight nods when she correctly diagnosed a plant disease in the garden, in the way he stepped back and let her handle tasks he'd once supervised closely, in the quiet good he offered, when she successfully treated a rabbit with an infected paw that had wandered into their clearing. "You're a natural at this," he said one morning as she carefully cleaned and dressed the rabbit's wound, while the animal sat surprisingly calm in her lap. "Most people rush. They want the healing done so they can stop looking at the hurt. You take your time." "Animals know when you're afraid," she replied, releasing the rabbit, which hopped away without urgency. "My mother taught me that. She said fear smells different than confidence, and wounded things can always smell fear." Smart woman, your mother. She was. Esther washed her hands in the basin. "I've been thinking about her more lately, remembering things I'd forgotten. The way she'd hum while cooking. How she never apologized for taking second helpings. She lived in her body like it was a home she was happy with, not a prison she was trying to escape." Josh handed her a towel. "Sounds like you're learning to do the same." "Maybe. It's strange I spent 3 years hating my body for being sick, for being too big, for making me unacceptable. Now I'm up here learning that bodies aren't enemies to be conquered. They're just bodies, trying their best with what they're given. That's more wisdom than most doctors ever learn." He moved to the stove where coffee was boiling. "Speaking of which, I've been thinking. There's a woman about 6 miles west, lives alone with 3 children. Her youngest has been sick for weeks, fever won't eat. I treated him last month, but he's relapsed. I should check on him." Esther felt her stomach tighten. "You're leaving?" "We're leaving. If you're learning medicine, you need to see patients. Real cases, not just theory and rabbit wounds. I'm not ready to— You are. And Esther. He poured coffee for them both. You need to see that there's a world beyond this cabin. People who need help. You can't hide up here forever. I'm not hiding. Aren't you? His gray eyes were kind but unflinching. You haven't been down the mountain once since you arrived. Haven't asked about town, about whether anyone's looking for you, about what happens next. That's not healing. That's just pausing. The words stung because they were true. She'd been so grateful for the safety of the cabin, for the rhythm of learning and working, that she'd stopped thinking about anything beyond it. The idea of facing people again, of being seen and judged, made her throat tight. What if they're cruel to me? What if Paulson's been spreading lies and everyone believes them? Then they're cruel and they believe lies. That doesn't make the lies true, and it doesn't make you less worthy of existing in the world. Josh set down his cup. I know it's hard. I spent 3 years up here avoiding the same thing. But the difference between isolation and solitude is choice. You should be up here because you want to be, not because you're afraid to be anywhere else. She wanted to argue, but couldn't find the words. He was right. She'd been hiding. All right, she said quietly. When do we leave? After breakfast. Pack light, we'll be back before dark. They set out an hour later, Josh carrying his medical bag, and Esther carrying a smaller pack he'd assembled for her bandages, basic medicines, a canteen. The trail west was less steep than the one she'd climbed 2 weeks ago, winding through pine forest and across meadows thick with wildflowers she was learning to identify. Josh named them as they walked. Arnica. Good for bruises and sprains, poisonous if ingested. Yarrow stops bleeding, can be made into tea for fever. Echinacea boosts healing, but use it sparingly or it stops working. How do you remember all of it? Years of practice, years of mistakes. I once gave a patient valerian root for anxiety and didn't realize she was also taking laudanum. Interaction nearly killed her. His voice was matter-of-fact, but she heard the old guilt beneath it. After that, I started keeping detailed notes on every treatment, every patient, every combination that worked or didn't. Medicine isn't just knowing what heals. It's knowing what kills. They walked in comfortable silence for a while. The morning sun filtered through the pines, warm on Esther's shoulders. Her legs, which had ached constantly those first days, were stronger now. She could keep Josh's pace without gasping. "Can I ask you something?" she said finally. "Always. That scar on your forearm, the long one, was that from the war?" His hand moved unconsciously to touch the mark. "Shiloh. Cannonball took out half the surgery tent. A piece of shrapnel went through my arm, nearly severed it. Another surgeon had to operate while I was conscious. We were out of chloroform, out of whiskey, out of everything but necessity." He pulled his sleeve down. "I remember every second of it. The sawing sensation, the smell of my own blood, the certainty I was going to die. But you didn't. No. And afterward, when I could use the arm again, I understood something about pain that I hadn't before. It's not something to be eliminated at any cost. It's information. It tells you what's wrong, where to focus attention, what needs healing. The problem is when pain becomes chronic, when it stops being information and just becomes noise that drowns out everything else." Esther thought about her own 3 years of constant discomfort. "Like my rash." "Exactly. Your body was screaming that something was wrong, but everyone told you to ignore the scream. To hide it, suppress it, be ashamed of it. That's not healing. That's just suffering quietly." "Is that why you left, because the army told you to ignore screams?" "Partly." He stepped over a fallen log and waited for her to follow. "But mostly I left because I couldn't stand the choosing anymore. Who gets morphine and who gets a bullet to bite? Who gets my attention and who gets left to die? In war, you have to make those choices constantly. Every decision is life or death, and you're always wrong because someone always dies." His voice roughened. "I watched men bleed out because I was elbow deep in someone else's chest. I amputated limbs that might have been saved if I'd had more time, more supplies. I became numb to it had to, or I couldn't function. And then one day, I realized I couldn't feel anything anymore. Not grief, not anger, not even satisfaction when someone survived. Just nothing. They emerged from the tree line into a clearing. Ahead sat a small cabin rougher than Josh's with a patched roof and a garden struggling against rocky soil. 2 children played outside, a girl around 8, and a boy slightly younger, both thin and wary-looking. That's when I knew I had to leave, Josh finished quietly, before the nothing swallowed me completely. The girl saw them first. She froze, then ran toward the cabin. "Mama, Dr. Josh is here." A woman appeared in the doorway, wiping her hands on her apron. She was younger than Esther expected, maybe 30, with dark hair and exhausted eyes. When she saw Josh, relief flooded her face. "Thank God, Samuel's worse. The fever came back yesterday higher than before." "This is Esther," Josh said, not breaking stride toward the cabin. "She's studying medicine with me. May we come in?" The woman, she introduced herself as Ann Porter, barely glanced at Esther before nodding. "Please, anything. He's in the back room." The cabin interior was dim and smelled of sickness, that particular combination of sweat fever and fear that Esther was learning to recognize. A boy of maybe 5 lay on a pallet in the corner, his face flushed, his breathing shallow. Josh knelt beside him immediately, hand going to the child's forehead. "How long has the fever been this high?" "Since yesterday morning. He won't eat, barely drinks. I've been trying willow bark tea like you said, but he just vomits it back up." Josh opened his bag and began his examination, checking the boy's pulse, looking in his mouth and ears, pressing gently on his stomach, while the child whimpered. His face remained calm, but Esther saw tension in his shoulders. "Esther, bring the lamp closer." She obeyed, holding it steady, while Josh peered down the boy's throat. "There. See the white patches? Throat infection spreading to the tonsils. That's why he can't keep food down. It hurts too much to swallow." He sat back on his heels. "Ann, when did this start?" 3 weeks ago. Just seemed like a cold at first." "And the fever comes and goes?" "Yes. 3 days high, 2 days better, then back again." Josh's jaw tightened. It's strep throat, complicated by the initial illness. His body's fighting, but not winning. He pulled out several vials. "We need to bring the fever down aggressively, get fluids into him, and treat the infection directly. Esther, I need you to prepare a throat paint, golden seal myrrh and glycerin. Mix it thick. We'll swab his throat every 2 hours." Esther's hands shook as she took the vials. "I've never made—" "You know the proportions. 2 parts golden seal, 1 part myrrh, enough glycerin to make it spreadable. You can do this." Ann brought her a bowl and spoon. Esther's mind raced through Josh's lessons. Golden seal was antibacterial. Myrrh was antifungal, and pain-relieving glycerin made it stick to infected tissue. She measured carefully, mixing until the paste reached the right consistency. Josh was already working on the boy, sponging him with cool water, getting drops of feverfew tincture into his mouth, speaking softly to keep him calm. When Esther handed him the throat paint, he dipped a clean cloth and gently swabbed the child's throat while Ann held him still. The boy coughed and cried, but Josh was patient and thorough. "Good," he said, examining Esther's mixture. "Consistency's right, smells right. Now we wait and repeat." They spent the next 6 hours in that cabin. Josh showed Esther how to monitor fever progression, how to recognize the difference between healing sleep and dangerous unconsciousness, how to adjust treatments based on the patient's response. Ann brought them water and bread, hovering anxiously. Asking questions, Josh answered with steady reassurance. By late afternoon, the boy's fever had dropped. He took a few sips of broth. The white patches in his throat were less angry. "He's turning," Josh said quietly. "Not out of danger yet, but turning." Ann's eyes filled with tears. "Thank you, both of you. I don't have money right now, but come harvest." "Stop." Josh closed his bag. "You don't owe me anything. Just keep doing the throat paint every 2 hours through tonight. If the fever spikes again, send word. Otherwise, I'll check him in 3 days. At least let me feed you before you go." They ate simple fare beans and cornbread, while Anne's other children watched Esther with open curiosity. The girl Mary finally worked up courage to speak. "Are you the lady Reverend Paulson says is living in sin with Dr. Josh?" "Mary." Anne's face went scarlet. "That's not—" "It's all right," Esther said quietly. "Yes, I'm living at Dr. Whitman's cabin. I came seeking medical treatment for a skin condition. He's teaching me medicine. Mama says Reverend Paulson's a mean old goat who wouldn't know God's work if it bit him on the rear." "Mary Porter, you did say that," the younger boy piped up. "When Dr. Josh saved Samuel last time and Reverend said it was unnatural." Anne looked mortified, but Josh laughed a real laugh, full and surprised. "Your mama's a wise woman, Mary." On the walk back, the sun beginning its descent, Esther felt something shift in her chest. She'd helped save a child's life. Her hands had mixed medicine that worked. Her presence had made a difference. For 6 hours, she'd forgotten to be afraid of being seen. "You did well today," Josh said as they climbed back toward his cabin. "Stayed calm under pressure. Trusted your knowledge, didn't second-guess yourself into paralysis." "I was terrified the whole time." "Being terrified and doing it anyway is called courage, not cowardice." He paused at an overlook where the valley spread below them. "You see that all those people down there, they're not thinking about you. They're not judging every breath you take. They're living their own lives, fighting their own battles. The ones who do judge, like Paulson, they're judging because it makes them feel powerful, not because you've actually done anything wrong. So I should stop caring what they think. You should stop letting what they think determine what you do." He resumed walking. "There's a difference. You can hear their opinions without accepting them as truth. You can acknowledge their disapproval without letting it shape your choices. That's freedom, Esther. Not the absence of judgment, but the refusal to be diminished by it." They reached the cabin as twilight settled. Josh lit lamps while Esther started coffee, their evening routine now familiar and comfortable. But as she moved through the tasks, she found herself thinking about Anne's children, about Samuel's fever breaking, about Mary's innocent question. "Josh, what Anne's daughter said about Reverend Paulson spreading rumors, does that bother you?" "Used to." He settled into his chair with a medical journal. "Now I figure the people who believe those rumors without asking questions aren't people I want in my life anyway. And the people who matter take time to see truth for themselves. Like Sheriff Coleman. Like Coleman, like Anne, like Martha, who sent you up here in the first place." He looked at her over the journal. "Like you, who walked 2 days based on nothing but hope that I might help. I didn't have a choice. You always have a choice. You chose not to give up. That matters." That night, lying in bed, Esther realized something profound had shifted. 2 weeks ago, she'd been hiding from the world. Today, she'd walked into it deliberately, worked in it, helped heal it. And the world hadn't destroyed her. Maybe Josh was right. Maybe the difference between isolation and solitude was choice. Maybe she was learning to choose. The next morning brought unexpected visitors. Esther was in the garden harvesting chamomile, while Josh replenished their dwindling supply of bandages, when voices drifted up from the trail. Female voices. She straightened, heart hammering. Josh emerged from the cabin, hand resting casually on the doorframe, close to where his rifle leaned, she noticed. 3 women appeared in the clearing. Esther recognized Martha Yates immediately. With her were 2 others, one elderly with silver hair and sharp eyes, the other younger, perhaps 20, with a pronounced limp. "Morning, Josh," Martha called. "We come in peace, bearing gifts." She held up a covered basket. "Martha." Josh relaxed visibly. "Ladies, to what do I owe this invasion? Can't a woman check on a friend?" But Martha's eyes had already found Esther. Her face broke into a wide smile. "Essie, look at you, your skin." Esther touched her neck self-consciously. "It's healing." "Healing, girl, it's miraculous. Martha set down her basket and approached with the easy familiarity of someone who'd known Esther for years. "We heard what happened with Paulson. Figured we'd come see for ourselves before the gossip got too thick to breathe through." The elderly woman stepped forward. "Helen Davies, I run the mercantile. This one's my granddaughter Lucy." She nodded at the young woman with the limp. "Lucy's been wanting to talk to you, Dr. Whitman, but nerves got the better of her." Lucy's face flushed. "It's not important. I shouldn't have—" "Your leg's been hurting for 6 months," Helen interrupted. "That's important enough. Show him." Josh's expression shifted to professional assessment. "Come sit on the porch. Let's have a look." While Josh examined Lucy's leg, Martha pulled Esther aside, looping an arm through hers, like they were old friends conspiring. "Town's buzzing like a kicked hornet nest. Half think you're a harlot, half think Paulson's finally lost his remaining marble. The interesting half is the women. They're asking questions." "What kind of questions?" "The kind like, if the fat girl's skin cleared up in 2 weeks, why'd Dr. Pemberton say it was hopeless? And maybe that mountain doctor isn't so crazy after all." Martha squeezed her arm. "You standing up to Paulson did something, Essie. Made people think. Some don't like thinking like Paulson, but others are wondering if maybe they've been wrong about a few things. I didn't mean to cause trouble. Trouble was already there. You just held up a mirror so folks could see it." Martha lowered her voice. "Lucy's leg has been bad since she fell from a horse last year. Pemberton said she'd always limp, nothing to be done. But Helen remembered my sister how Josh fixed what 3 doctors said was unfixable. So, here we are." Josh called Martha over to translate something Lucy was saying. The girl was so nervous she could barely speak. Helen sidled up to Esther. "You seem different from how I remember. Steadier?" "I feel different." "Good. Town like Timber Creek will crush you flat if you let it. My Albert passed 5 years ago used to say that people talk because they're afraid. Afraid their own choices don't matter. Afraid someone else's courage makes their fear look like cowardice." Helen's eyes were knowing. "Paulson's afraid. Has been for years. Afraid his God's too small to handle questions." "What do you believe?" Esther asked. "I believe healing's healing no matter who does it. And I believe young women shouldn't have to live with pain because some man's pride won't let him admit ignorance." She watched Josh work with Lucy. "My granddaughter's 20 years old. Should be dancing, courting, living. Instead, she stays home because walking hurts, and she's embarrassed by the limp. If Josh can help her, I don't give a damn what Paulson says about it." Josh spent an hour with Lucy asking questions, manipulating her leg, carefully explaining what he found. A tendon had healed poorly, pulling tight. Not unfixable, but requiring consistent treatment stretches, massage, specific exercises. "It'll take months," he told her honestly, "and it'll hurt sometimes. But if you do the work, the limp should improve significantly." Lucy's eyes filled with tears. "Really?" "Really. Come back twice a week. I'll teach you what to do, and you'll do it religiously. Deal?" She nodded, unable to speak. Before the women left, Martha pulled a sealed envelope from her basket and handed it to Esther. "From your landlady. Mrs. Carmichael packed up your things from the boarding house. Said to tell you she don't believe a word Paulson's saying, and you're welcome to come back any time. But also said if you're happy where you are, she understands." Esther took the envelope with shaking hands. Inside was a short note in Mrs. Carmichael's neat script. "Follow your healing wherever it leads. Don't let small minds make you small. C.C." After the women left, Josh and Esther worked in silence for a while, processing the visit. "That was unexpected," she finally said. "Was it Martha's been sending people up here for 2 years? She trusts me more than she trusts Pemberton." He paused. "The question is, are you ready for more? Because if word gets out that Lucy's leg is improving, more will come. More women hiding from Reverend Paulson's judgment. More people who need help and aren't getting it. More folks like you who've been told their suffering is their fault." His gray eyes were serious. "This is what it means, Esther. If you stay, if you choose this life, It's not just you and me in a quiet cabin. It's people arriving with pain and need. It's Paulson increasing his attacks because each person we help undermines his authority. It's choosing purpose over peace. Esther looked down at the chamomile in her basket at her hands that now knew how to heal instead of just hide. "I'm ready," she said. "I choose this." Josh smiled, then rare and genuine. "Good. Because I could use a partner, and you're going to be excellent at this." That night, as she lay in bed listening to the mountain wind, Esther realized the fear she'd carried for so long was transforming. Not disappearing, she was still afraid of judgment, of cruelty, of Paulson's promised retribution. But the fear was no longer in charge. She was learning to carry it without being crushed by it, to acknowledge its presence without accepting its verdict, to move forward despite its weight. And somewhere in that learning and that choosing, she was becoming someone she'd never imagined possible. Not the invisible fat girl desperate to disappear, not the cursed woman hiding her shame, but Esther Hartwell, healer, in training partner to a ghost doctor woman who stood her ground when threatened and offered hope when asked. The woman she'd been walking toward without knowing it every painful step of that 2-day climb up Copper Mountain. Outside, the night settled deep and quiet, and far below in Timber Creek, Reverend Paulson sat at his desk, composing a letter to the territorial authorities. Because the righteous didn't surrender, they adapted their attack. The letter arrived 3 weeks later, delivered by Deputy Webb, who looked uncomfortable and wouldn't meet Josh's eyes when he handed over the official document. "I'm sorry, Doc. Orders from the territorial marshal. You've got to appear in Timber Creek next Monday to answer charges." Josh unfolded the paper and read in silence, his face unreadable. Esther stood in the doorway, her stomach churning. "What charges?" she asked. "Practicing medicine without proper certification, harboring a woman of questionable moral character, engaging in conduct unbecoming to public health standards." Josh's voice was flat as he read. Signed by Reverend Paulson, Dr. Pemberton, and 17 upstanding citizens of Timber Creek. "That's horseshit," Webb muttered, then flushed. "Pardon my language, Miss Hartwell, but everyone knows Paulson's been gunning for you since that business with the Hutchins woman 3 years back." "The one whose husband was beating her," Josh said. "Yeah. Paulson said she needed to submit to her husband's authority. You said she needed medical attention and a safe place to heal. You won." Webb shifted his weight. "Look, Doc, between you and me. Half the town knows this is garbage. But Paulson's got connections in the territorial government. Judge Morrison owes him favors. This hearing's going to be ugly." "Will they arrest him?" Esther heard the tremor in her own voice. "Not if he shows up voluntarily and conducts himself respectfully." Webb looked at Josh. "You planning to show—" "Of course. I'm not running from Paulson's tantrum." "Good. Because if you don't, they'll issue a warrant, and then I'll have to come back with the sheriff to bring you in by force. And neither of us wants that." Webb touched his hat brim. "Monday morning, 9 o'clock town hall. Bring whatever documentation you have about your medical training." After Webb left, Josh stood holding the letter, staring at it like it might change if he looked long enough. "This is because of me," Esther said quietly. "Because I came here. Because I let you treat me. This is because Paulson's a small man with a big Bible and too much influence. You're just his current excuse." Josh set the paper on the table. "If it wasn't you, it'd be Lucy or Anne or the next person who dares to get better without his permission. What are you going to do?" Exactly what Webb said. Show up, present my credentials, answer their questions honestly, and dare them to find actual wrongdoing. He moved to the shelf where he kept a locked box. From it, he pulled a leather folder containing documents, certificates, letters of reference, military records. "I served as a field surgeon for 3 years, trained under Dr. Samuel Morton at Philadelphia Medical College before the war. I have more formal education than Pemberton and twice his experience. They can question my methods, but they can't question my qualifications." "But they can question me." Esther's throat was tight. "They can say I'm living here improperly. that you've taken advantage of me, that we're—" She couldn't finish the sentence. Josh set down the folder and turned to face her fully. "Are you worried about what they'll say, or are you worried it might be true?" The question landed like a physical blow. "What? You've been here almost 6 weeks, Esther. We live in close quarters, work together daily, share meals and conversation. By conventional standards, this situation is improper. The question is whether you feel you've been compromised or taken advantage of." "No, you've been nothing but respectful." "Then that's what you'll say if asked. The truth is simple. You came seeking medical treatment. I provided it, and in exchange, you're learning medicine and helping with necessary work. There's nothing shameful in that arrangement, unless we decide to be ashamed of it." "But Paulson will twist it. He'll make it sound sordid." "Paulson will do what Paulson does. We can't control that." Josh's voice softened. "What we can control is whether we let his poison infect us. Whether we start doubting ourselves, questioning our choices, hiding what we've built here like it's something wrong instead of something good." Esther sank into a chair, her hands shaking. "I don't want you to lose everything because you helped me." "I'm not going to lose everything, and even if I did—" He paused, choosing his words carefully. "Even if they somehow revoke my right to practice, ban me from treating patients, drive me off this mountain entirely, helping you would still have been worth it. Because you're not just some patient I treated and sent away. You're someone who was dying inside her own skin, and now you're not. That matters more than Paulson's approval or the territorial government's blessing." "You really believe that?" "I really believe that." He pulled out the chair across from her and sat. "But here's what I need to know, Esther. That hearing is going to be brutal. They'll question you about your time here, your relationship with me, your moral character. They'll try to embarrass you into admitting something improper occurred. Are you strong enough to face that?" She thought about the woman who'd climbed this mountain 6 weeks ago, desperate, ashamed, willing to die rather than face another day of judgment. That woman would have crumbled under interrogation. But she wasn't that woman anymore. "Yes," she said, "I'm strong enough." "Good. Because we're going to walk into that town hall together, heads high, and we're going to tell the truth without apology. And whatever happens after, we'll handle it." The days before the hearing passed in strange suspension. Josh continued teaching, if anything more intensely, as if he needed to cram months of knowledge into days. Lucy came for her treatments, and Josh made sure Esther led each session, supervising but not taking over. "If they prohibit me from practicing, you need to be able to continue the work," he explained. "Lucy's leg, Samuel's throat infections, all the people who will keep coming because they have nowhere else to go. Someone has to help them. They won't let me practice. I'm not a real doctor. Neither am I, according to Paulson, but that doesn't stop wounds from needing cleaning or fevers from needing breaking. Medicine happens whether it's sanctioned or not." He handed her a journal. "I've been keeping detailed notes for years, every treatment, every patient, what worked and what didn't. If something happens to me, this is yours. Learn from my successes and my failures. Stop talking like you're not coming back." "I am coming back, but I'm also practical." His expression was grim. "Paulson wants me gone, Esther. Not just discredited, gone. And men with power and righteous certainty have ways of making people disappear legally or otherwise. So yes, I'm preparing for possibilities I'd rather not consider." That night, Esther couldn't sleep. She lay in the bed that had become hers, staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment of the past 6 weeks. Learning to make salve. Treating Samuel's fever. Standing up to Paulson on this very porch. Slowly discovering that her body wasn't her enemy, and her presence wasn't something to apologize for. Josh had given her all of that, and now Paulson was trying to destroy him for it. She rose quietly and moved to where Josh lay on his bedroll by the dying fire. "Are you awake?" "Yeah." "Can I ask you something?" He sat up, running a hand through his hair. "Always. Why did you really leave the army, and don't give me the speech about choosing and numbness? There's more to it. I can tell." For a long moment he was silent. Then he spoke into the darkness, his voice low and raw. "There was a battle. Shiloh, the one where I got this." He touched his scarred arm. "We'd been operating for 36 hours straight. Men everywhere screaming dying. I was working on a captain gut wound, should have been hopeless, but he was young and strong and I thought maybe. Then they brought in a private leg blown off below the knee. Simple amputation, clean the wound, cauterize rapid. 10 minutes of work maximum." He paused, and Esther heard the pain in his breathing. "My commanding officer ordered me to let the private die and focus on the captain. Said the captain was worth more educated man, family connections, leadership value. The private was just some farmer's son from nowhere. I refused. Said I'd finish with the captain, then treat the private. The colonel pulled his pistol and told me if I didn't obey orders, he'd shoot the private himself to spare the morphine." "Oh God, Josh." "I made a choice. Saved the captain. Watched the private bleed out on the ground 5 feet away, begging for help I could have given if I'd had 10 more minutes. The captain died anyway. Infection set in, killed him 3 days later. And that private's face haunts me every single night." His voice cracked. "His name was Daniel Cooper. He was 19 years old. He wrote letters to his mother that I had to send home after he died. And I let him bleed out because I was following orders." Esther moved closer, sitting beside him, though she didn't touch him. "It wasn't your fault." "Wasn't it? I had the skill to save him. I chose to obey instead. And from that moment on, every time someone told me who was worth saving and who wasn't, I saw Daniel Cooper's face, heard him begging, felt the weight of that choice crushing me." He looked at her, then his eyes reflecting firelight. "So when Paulson tells me who deserves healing and who doesn't, when Pemberton decides your suffering is your own fault, when the town decides some lives matter more than others, I see Daniel. And I refuse to make that choice ever again. That's why you treat everyone who comes. That's why I treat everyone who comes. Why I moved to this mountain where nobody can order me to choose. Why I'll keep treating people even if they revoke every credential I have." His jaw set. "And why I won't let Paulson win. Because if he drives me away, people like you die. Maybe not physically, but inside where it counts just as much." Esther felt tears on her face. "Thank you for telling me." "Thank you for asking." He managed a slight smile. "Now get some sleep. Monday's going to be hard enough without exhaustion making it harder." But sleep didn't come. Instead, Esther lay awake thinking about Daniel Cooper, about Josh's choice, about all the ways people decide who matters and who doesn't. About how she'd spent 3 years accepting the verdict that she didn't matter, that her suffering was deserved, that asking for help was shameful. And about how Josh had looked at her that first day and decided differently. Monday morning dawned clear and cold. They dressed carefully, Josh in his only suit, worn but clean. Esther in a simple dress Martha had sent up the week before, knowing she'd need something appropriate for town. "Ready?" Josh asked, offering his arm. Esther took it, drawing strength from the solid warmth of him beside her. "Ready." The walk down took 2 hours. With each step closer to Timber Creek, Esther felt old fears rising, the weight of judgment, the shame of being seen, the certainty that she was about to be dissected and found wanting. But she kept walking. They reached town just before 9. People stopped on the street to stare. Some faces held sympathy. Martha waved from the dress shop. Helen Davies nodded approvingly from the mercantile steps. But others held hostility. Mrs. Perkins from the church pulled her daughter close as they passed, as if moral decay might be contagious. The town hall was already crowded. Paulson stood at the front with Dr. Pemberton and Judge Morrison, a corpulent man with shrewd eyes and a reputation for fairness, tempered by political pragmatism. Sheriff Coleman sat to one side, his expression carefully neutral. As Josh and Esther entered, conversation died. Every eye turned to them. Paulson's smile was thin and triumphant. "How kind of you to join us, Dr. Whitman. And Miss Hartwell. How appropriate that you arrived together." We live in the same direction, Reverend. Walking together seemed efficient. Josh's voice was pleasant, but cold. Shall we begin? I have patients who need attending. Judge Morrison banged his gavel. This hearing will come to order. Dr. Joshua Whitman, you stand accused of practicing medicine without proper territorial certification of housing an unmarried woman in circumstances detrimental to public morality, and of treatments deemed dangerous and unorthodox by established medical professionals. How do you respond? Not guilty on all counts, Your Honor. I'm happy to address each charge individually. Josh placed his leather folder on the table. I have documentation of my medical education, my military service, and letters of reference from supervising physicians. I'm more than qualified to practice medicine by any reasonable standard. Pemberton stood. Qualified by what standard? Frontier quackery. You have no territorial license, no oversight, no accountability. You dose people with herbs and tonics that haven't been proven safe. You make promises you can't keep, giving false hope to the desperate. I give actual healing to people you've given up on, Josh replied evenly. Ann Porter's son was dying of strep throat you called incurable. He's now healthy and eating normally. Lucy Davies had a leg injury you said would never improve. She's already walking with less pain after 3 weeks of proper treatment. And Miss Hartwell. He gestured to Esther. You told her she was suffering from moral weakness. I correctly diagnosed stress-induced dermatitis and treated it successfully. Those aren't false hopes, Dr. Pemberton. Those are results. Results achieved through improper means. You undermine the medical establishment, encourage people to distrust proper doctors. I encourage people to seek healing wherever they can find it. If that undermines you, perhaps you should examine why your patients are desperate enough to climb a mountain for help. The room erupted in murmurs. Morrison banged his gavel. Order, Dr. Pemberton. Do you have evidence that Dr. Whitman's treatments have caused harm? Pemberton's jaw worked. The potential for harm is evident in his methods. Potential isn't evidence. Have his treatments caused documented harm? Well, no specific cases, but then that charge appears unsubstantiated. Morrison turned to Paulson. Reverend, you've brought the moral conduct charge. Present your case. Paulson stood Bible in hand, his face alight with righteous fervor. Your Honor, this man has corrupted a vulnerable woman. Miss Hartwell, known to be of weak constitution and desperate circumstances, fled to his mountain cabin, where she has remained for 6 weeks unchaperoned and unmarried. The impropriety is self-evident. Miss Hartwell, Morrison said, approach the bench. Esther's legs felt like water, but she moved forward. Every eye in the room tracked her movement. She heard whispers, still fat. Looks different, though. Skin's cleared up. Miss Hartwell, you're under oath. Has Dr. Whitman behaved improperly toward you in any way? No, Your Honor. Her voice was steadier than she expected. He's been nothing but professional and respectful. Has he made unwanted advances, suggestions, or demands? Never. Then explain to this court why a respectable unmarried woman would choose to live alone with a man for 6 weeks. This was the moment. The trap. She could feel Paulson's anticipation, Pemberton's smug certainty, the crowd's hungry curiosity. Esther took a breath and chose truth. Because I was dying, Your Honor. Not physically, though my body was destroying itself, but inside where it matters. I'd spent 3 years being told my suffering was my fault, that my body was punishment for moral failure, that I deserved pain because I wasn't thin enough or disciplined enough or godly enough. Her voice grew stronger. Dr. Pemberton told me to starve myself and pray. Reverend Paulson suggested my affliction was God's judgment. They both made it clear I was unworthy of help. So I went to the only person who might look at me without disgust. And he saved my life, not just my skin, but the part of me that wanted to live. Dramatic testimony. Paulson said coldly, but it doesn't address the impropriety. I'm not finished. Esther turned to face him directly. You want to know about impropriety, Reverend? Is it improper for a doctor to treat a patient? Is it improper for a dying woman to seek help? Or is it only improper because I'm fat, and he's kind, and that threatens your belief that suffering is always deserved. How dare you? I dare because I'm not afraid of you anymore." Her hands were shaking, but her voice was clear. "You've spent years telling people like me that we're less than human, that our pain is righteous punishment, that asking for help is weakness. Dr. Whitman taught me that my body isn't my enemy, and my suffering isn't proof of sin. If that's impropriety, then I'm glad to be improper. And if you're so concerned with morality, perhaps you should examine why healing the sick offends you so deeply." The room was dead silent. Morrison's expression was unreadable. "Strong words, Miss Hartwell." "True words, Your Honor." Dr. Whitman, stand. Josh rose. These charges appear largely motivated by personal animosity rather than legitimate concern for public welfare. However, the question of territorial licensing remains. You're practicing medicine without official certification. "I have certifications from Philadelphia Medical College and the Union Army Medical Corps. I'm happy to apply for territorial licensing if the process is fair and based on competence rather than politics." A reasonable response. Morrison shuffled papers. "Here's my ruling. Dr. Whitman will apply for territorial medical licensing within 60 days. Until that application is processed, he may continue treating patients under provisional authority provided he maintains detailed records and submits to periodic review. As for the moral conduct charges..." He looked at Paulson. "Without evidence of actual impropriety, this court has no grounds to prohibit two consenting adults from living and working together. Miss Hartwell's testimony indicates no coercion or abuse. The charge is dismissed." "Your Honor, you can't," Paulson started. "I can and I have. This hearing is concluded." The gavel fell. Paulson's face went purple. Pemberton looked stunned. But Martha was smiling, and Helen Davies was nodding approval, and even Sheriff Coleman looked satisfied. Outside in the bright morning sun, Josh let out a breath he'd been holding for what felt like hours. "Well, that could have gone worse." Esther laughed a slightly hysterical sound. "That was terrifying." "You were magnificent. Paulson's face when you called him out on his cruelty." Josh shook his head. "I've been fighting him for 3 years and never landed a blow that clean. I was so afraid." "Being afraid and doing it anyway, that's courage." He started walking toward the edge of town. "Come on, let's go home before Paulson recovers enough to cause more trouble." But before they could leave, Martha hurried over with Helen and Lucy in tow. "That was the bravest thing I've ever seen," Martha said, hugging Esther tightly. Half the women in that room wanted to stand up and cheer. "The other half wanted to faint from shock," Helen added dryly. "Which is almost as good. You made them think, girl, made them question. That's dangerous work." Dr. Whitman. Lucy stepped forward shyly. "My leg's been better this week. Almost no pain. I wanted you to know in case they didn't let you keep helping people." "They let me." Josh's expression softened. "Keep doing your exercises. You're healing beautifully." As they finally walked out of Timber Creek, heading back up the mountain trail, Esther felt something settle in her chest. Not relief exactly, Paulson would try again. Morrison's ruling wouldn't stop the gossip, and the path ahead was still uncertain. But for the first time in 3 years, she'd stood in front of people who judged her and refused to accept their verdict. She'd spoken her truth without apology. She'd defended Josh and defended herself and walked out with her head high. And the world hadn't ended. "What are you thinking?" Josh asked as they climbed. "That I spent so long being afraid of being seen, thinking that visibility meant destruction. But today I was seen, really seen, and I survived it. More than survived. I felt..." She searched for the word. "Solid. Real. Like I exist in the world instead of just hiding from it." "You do exist in the world. Always did. You were just waiting for the world to notice without destroying you for it." He paused on the trail looking back at the town below. "Paulson's not done, you know. Today was a setback for him, not a defeat. I know, but we'll handle it. Yes, Josh said quietly. We will. They climbed in comfortable silence as the sun rose higher, warming the mountain air. By the time they reached the cabin, it was past noon. Josh immediately began checking on his supplies and patient notes, his mind already moving to the work ahead. But Esther stood on the porch for a moment, looking out at the wilderness that had become home. 6 weeks ago, she'd arrived here broken and desperate, willing to die if healing wasn't possible. Now she stood here whole, not perfect, not finished, but whole in the ways that mattered. Her skin was healing. Her spirit was stronger. Her voice had power she'd never known existed. And she'd found something she'd never expected to find in this isolated cabin on a mountain far from everything familiar. She'd found herself. Not the self Timber Creek had tried to make her. Not the self shame and fear had convinced her she was. But her real self. The one that had been there all along, waiting for someone to believe she was worth finding. Inside, Josh called her name, needing help with something medical. Esther smiled and went to work. Because this was her life now, and she'd chosen it. And no reverend's judgment, or town's gossip, or fear's whisper could take that choice away. The attack came 3 nights later, under a moonless sky that hid everything in shadow. Esther woke to the smell of smoke. For a confused moment, she thought Josh had let the fire burn too high, but then she heard his voice sharp and urgent. Esther, get up, now. She scrambled out of bed, her heart already racing. Through the window, she saw orange light flickering not from inside the cabin, but from outside from multiple points around the clearing. Torches. How many? She asked, her voice surprisingly steady. At least a dozen. They've circled us. Josh was loading his rifle with quick, practiced movements. Get dressed. Stay away from the windows. She pulled on her dress with shaking hands, her mind racing. This was it. Paulson's promised retribution. The righteous coming to burn out the den of iniquity. What do? We don't give them what they want. Josh moved to the door, rifle ready, but not raised. They want us to run or fight or do something that justifies what they're about to do. So we don't. Josh, they're going to burn us out. Not if I can help it. He glanced back at her, and in the dim light, his expression was fierce. Trust me. Always. He opened the door and stepped onto the porch. The torches formed a rough circle around the cabin, held by men whose faces were hidden in shadow and bandanas. But Esther recognized the shapes. The tall, thin one was definitely Reverend Paulson, and the shorter, stocky one beside him looked like Pemberton. The others were townsmen, emboldened by darkness and numbers. Gentlemen, Josh called out, his voice carrying calm authority. It's late for a social call. State your business or go home. You know our business, devil doctor. Paulson's voice was tight with righteous fury. The law may have failed to remove you, but God's judgment will not. This mountain will be cleansed of your corruption. Cleansed? You mean burned? Josh descended 1 step, making himself more visible in the torchlight. Tell me, Reverend, which commandment permits arson? I seem to have forgotten that particular scripture. Mock all you want. Your words won't save you now. My words aren't meant to save me. They're meant to save you. Josh's voice hardened. Because if you burn this cabin, you're not punishing sin. You're committing murder. And unlike your God, who you claim speaks only to you, the territorial law is very clear about murder. Sheriff Coleman is very clear about it, and he's already on his way here. A murmur rippled through the mob. Several torches wavered. You're bluffing, Pemberton said, but his voice held uncertainty. Am I? Lucy Davies was supposed to come for treatment this evening. When she didn't arrive, I sent word to her grandmother in town. Helen Davies is many things, gentlemen, but stupid isn't one of them. She knew exactly what it meant when Lucy was prevented from leaving town. She went straight to Coleman. Josh paused. So here's what's going to happen. You can stand here holding torches and making threats until the sheriff arrives to arrest you for attempted arson. Or you can go home, pretend this never happened, and we all wake up tomorrow with no one in jail and no one dead. Your choice." "He's lying," Paulson insisted, but his voice had lost its certainty. Then from down the mountain trail came the sound of horses, multiple riders moving fast. Several men in the mob broke immediately, dropping their torches and melting into the darkness. Others hesitated, looking to Paulson for guidance. The Reverend stood rigid, torch clutched tight. "This isn't over, Whitman. God's judgment." "God's judgment is between you and God," Josh interrupted. "But if you're still here when Coleman arrives, you'll have to explain to a territorial judge why you thought arson was doing the Lord's work. Somehow I don't think that argument will hold up in court." Sheriff Coleman emerged into the clearing on horseback, flanked by 2 deputies and unexpectedly Judge Morrison himself. The judge's face was thunderous. "Reverend Paulson," Morrison said, his voice like granite, "drop that torch, now." "Your Honor, I can explain." "I don't want explanations. I want that torch on the ground before I charge you with attempted murder." Paulson's hand shook. For a long moment he stood frozen, caught between his conviction and his self-preservation. Then slowly he lowered the torch and ground it out in the dirt. The remaining men did the same, their faces pale in the dying light. Coleman dismounted and walked slowly around the clearing, looking at each man in turn. "I know every one of you. Robert Jensen from the mill. Thomas Pritchard, who runs the stables. Daniel March from the church. Good men, supposedly. Family men. And you came up here in the middle of the night to burn out a doctor and a woman under his care." "We were protecting the community," Pemberton said weakly. "From what medicine that actually works? People who get better under Whitman's care." Coleman's voice was disgusted. "You weren't protecting anything. You were enforcing your own pride because the hearing didn't go your way." "The hearing was a travesty," Paulson said. "Morrison refused to see the moral corruption." "Judge Morrison," the judge corrected coldly, "saw 2 adults living and working together legally. What I'm seeing now is a dozen men attempting arson and making terroristic threats. Which crime should concern me more, Reverend?" Paulson's mouth opened and closed like a fish. "Here's what's going to happen," Morrison continued. "Every man here is going to provide his name to Deputy Webb. You're going to go home. If Dr. Whitman chooses to press charges, you'll answer for this. If he doesn't, you're going to thank whatever God you claim to serve, that he's more merciful than you deserve." He turned to Josh. "Dr. Whitman, do you wish to press charges?" Josh was silent for a long moment. Esther could see him weighing options, considering consequences. Then he shook his head. "No, Your Honor, on one condition." "Name it." "Reverend Paulson and Dr. Pemberton resign from the town council, permanently. They've proven they can't separate personal vendetta from public service. If they want to preach and practice medicine, fine. But they don't get to use civic authority to persecute people they disapprove of." Morrison's eyebrows rose. "That's a significant demand. It's a fair trade for not charging 12 men with attempted murder." "Your Honor, you can't seriously—" Paulson started. "I can, and I will." Morrison's voice was final. "Both of you will submit resignations by week's end, or I'll bring formal charges and let a jury decide your fate. Given that you just attempted to burn down a cabin with 2 people inside, I'm confident which way that verdict would go." Pemberton looked sick. Paulson looked murderous. But neither argued further. "Now get off this mountain," Coleman said. "All of you. Before I change my mind about letting you walk away." The men dispersed quickly, shamefaced and silent. Paulson lingered last, his eyes boring into Josh with pure hatred. "This isn't over," he said quietly. "Yes, it is." Josh's voice was gentle but immovable. "You've lost Reverend. Not because I beat you, but because you beat yourself. You're so convinced that suffering equals sin that you can't see healing when it happens. That's not faith, that's fear. And I'm done letting your fear dictate how I live." Paulson turned and walked away without another word. When the last horse disappeared down the trail, Morrison approached the porch. "That was well handled, Dr. Whitman. Calmer than I'd have been facing a mob." "I've faced worse. At least these men weren't shooting at me." "Still, you showed considerable restraint." Morrison glanced at Esther, who'd remained silent throughout. "Miss Hartwell, are you all right?" "Yes, Your Honor. Frightened, but all right. I apologize on behalf of Timber Creek. What happened tonight doesn't represent the whole town. Many people are grateful for Dr. Whitman's work." He turned back to Josh. "That said, you've made powerful enemies. Paulson will lose his position, yes, but he'll still have influence in the church. And men like him don't forgive being humiliated. I'm not asking for his forgiveness. I'm just asking to be left alone to do my work." "Fair enough." Morrison mounted his horse. "I'll send word once the resignations are filed. And Dr. Whitman, about that territorial licensing, I'll personally ensure your application is processed fairly and quickly. Consider it compensation for tonight's ordeal." After they left, Josh and Esther stood in silence on the porch, watching dawn begin to lighten the eastern sky. The smell of smoke lingered acrid and threatening. "I thought we were going to die," Esther said finally. "So did I for a minute." Josh set his rifle against the wall. "But Paulson's a coward at heart. He wanted righteousness without risk. When the risk became real, his conviction evaporated. You were amazing. The way you stayed calm talked them down." "I was terrified. My hands are still shaking." He held them up to prove it. "But I learned in the war that panic spreads faster than fire. Stay calm, and sometimes others calm down too. Panic, and everyone dies." Esther moved closer, drawn by an impulse she didn't fully understand. "Josh." He turned to face her, and in the pale dawn light, she saw exhaustion and relief, and something else in his expression, something unguarded. "Thank you," she said, "for protecting me, for standing between me and that mob, for—" her voice caught, "for making me believe I was worth protecting." "Esther, let me finish." She took a breath. 6 weeks ago, I came here ready to die. Not dramatically, not suicidally, just willing to stop existing if existing meant constant pain and shame. You didn't just heal my skin. You taught me that I deserved to exist, that my body wasn't my enemy, that suffering wasn't proof of unworthiness. Tears were streaming down her face now. You saved my life in every way a person can be saved. Josh reached out slowly and wiped a tear from her cheek with his thumb. The gesture was so tender, it broke something open in her chest. You saved yourself, he said quietly. I just gave you space to do it. Everything else, the courage, the growth, the standing up to Paulson, that was all you. It was us, together. Yes, he agreed. Together. They stood like that for a long moment, his hand still touching her face, dawn breaking around them. Then Josh stepped back, clearing his throat. We should check for damage. Make sure none of those torches caught anything. They spent the next hour inspecting the cabin and clearing, finding places where grass had been scorched, but nothing seriously damaged. As they worked, Esther felt the adrenaline of the night slowly drain away, leaving her exhausted, but strangely peaceful. What happens now? She asked as they finished. Now we keep working. Lucy still needs treatment. Samuel probably has another cold by now that kid's immune system is learning slowly. Anne's going to need help delivering her next baby in a few months. Josh smiled slightly. Life continues. Work continues. We continue. Will Paulson really stop? No, but he'll be more careful. He's lost public authority, but he still has the church, and fear of damnation is a powerful weapon. He'll keep preaching against me, keep telling people I'm dangerous. Josh shrugged. But actions speak louder than sermons. Every person who heals under my care is proof he's wrong. Over the following weeks, that proof accumulated steadily. Lucy's limp diminished until she could walk almost normally. Samuel grew stronger and healthier, his mother's haunted expression easing into something like hope. More people came. A man with chronic pain, Pemberton had dismissed as malingering a woman with migraines that had stolen years of her life. A child with a stutter, everyone said was demonic possession. Josh treated them all, and Esther assisted, her skills growing with each patient. She learned to recognize pneumonia by the quality of a cough, to diagnose infections by smell, to read pain in the tension of a body before words were spoken. "You're a natural healer," Josh told her one evening as they reviewed patient notes. "Better instincts than some doctors with 10 years more experience." "I learned from the best." "You learned because you care. That's the part no school can teach." He closed the journal. "Esther, I've been thinking. When my territorial license comes through, I'm going to officially take you on as my apprentice. Full medical training, proper documentation. In a few years you could apply for your own license." She stared at him. "You're serious?" "Completely. You're already doing the work. Might as well make it official." "But I'm—" She stopped herself, the old words rising automatically. "Fat, uneducated, unworthy." "You're what?" Josh prompted gently. "I was going to say I'm not qualified. But that's not true anymore, is it?" "It was never true. You just believed it was." He stood and stretched. "Think about it. No pressure. But the offer stands." That night, lying in bed, Esther thought about the past 8 weeks. About the woman who'd climbed this mountain, expecting nothing but maybe a few more days without pain. About everything she'd learned and become and discovered about herself. About Josh, whose steady presence had become as essential as breathing. Somewhere in the weeks of working together, learning together, facing danger, together something had shifted between them. Nothing inappropriate. Josh remained scrupulously professional, careful about boundaries, proper in every way. But underneath the propriety, there was warmth, connection. Something that felt like the beginning of something neither of them had named yet. 3 months after the mob's attack on a crisp October morning, Josh's territorial license arrived. He read the official document twice as if expecting the words to change, then handed it to Esther silently. "You did it," she said, smiling. "You're officially legitimate. We did it. This license has your name on it too, as my registered apprentice." He pointed to the line where her name appeared in formal script, "Esther Hartwell, Medical Apprentice." She traced the letters with her finger, emotion tightening her throat. "My name, in official documents, as something other than charity case or moral failure." "As what you are, a healer in training." Josh folded the document carefully. "There's something else. The licensing board wants to inspect my practice, meet my apprentice, verify that I'm maintaining proper standards. They're sending someone next week." "Are you worried?" "No. We keep meticulous records, use proven treatments, maintain sterile conditions. We'll pass any reasonable inspection." He paused. "But it means people from outside Timber Creek seeing our work, judging it. If they approve, it legitimizes everything. If they don't, they will. Because what we do here is real medicine, not quackery or devil's work, or whatever Paulson calls it. We heal people. That's all that matters." The inspector arrived 7 days later. Dr. Sarah Chen, a no-nonsense woman from Denver with sharp eyes and sharper questions. She spent 3 days reviewing their records, observing treatments, interviewing patients. "Your documentation is exceptional," she told Josh on the final day. "Most frontier practices are haphazard at best. You've maintained surgical-level precision." "I learned in the Army. Sloppy records get people killed." "And your apprentice." Chen turned to Esther. "How long have you been studying?" 3 months, ma'am." "Only 3 months. Your practical knowledge is impressive. I watched you treat that child's infection yesterday. Textbook approach, excellent bedside manner." Chen made notes. "Most apprentices take years to develop that level of confidence." "Miss Hartwell has natural talent," Josh said. "And she's highly motivated." Chen's expression softened slightly. I read the reports about Reverend Paulson's accusations and the subsequent mob action. That must have been frightening. It was, Esther said honestly. But it also clarified something. I could spend my life afraid of judgment, or I could live my life doing work that matters. The second option seemed better. Wise choice. Chen closed her folder. Dr. Whitman, I'm recommending full approval of your license with commendation. Your practice meets and exceeds territorial standards. Additionally, I'm noting Miss Hartwell's apprenticeship as exemplary. If she continues at this pace, she'll be eligible for licensing examination in 3 years instead of the usual 5. After Chen left, Josh and Esther stood in the clearing watching the inspector's horse disappear down the trail. 3 years, Esther said wonderingly. 3 years and I could be a real doctor. You're already a real doctor. The license will just be the paperwork to prove it. Josh turned to her, his expression serious. Esther, these past months working with you, teaching you, learning from you, building this practice together, it's been the best time I've had since before the war. Maybe the best time I've ever had. Her heart was suddenly racing. Josh, let me finish. I know we agreed this was professional, doctor and apprentice, colleagues. And I've tried to keep it that way, I swear I have. But somewhere along the line, you stopped being just my apprentice. You became my partner, my friend, my... He stopped, struggling for words. You're what? She whispered. I don't know what to call it. All I know is that I wake up looking forward to seeing you. That your laugh makes me happy in ways I'd forgotten were possible. That working beside you feels right in a way nothing else ever has. And that the thought of you ever leaving this mountain makes my chest tight. Esther felt tears on her face. I'm not leaving. You might. Once you're licensed, you could practice anywhere. Denver, San Francisco, places where people won't judge you for your past, or your body, or... Josh. She stepped closer, closing the distance between them. I'm not leaving. Not because I can't, but because I don't want to. This mountain, this cabin, this work... She paused, gathering courage. You. I choose you. I choose this. His hands came up to cup her face, trembling slightly. Are you sure? Because once I kiss you once, this becomes more than professional. There's no going back to before. People will talk. Paulson will have new ammunition. Your reputation? My reputation is already ruined, remember? According to Paulson, I'm a fallen woman living in sin. Might as well make it worth the gossip. She smiled through tears. Besides, my reputation isn't who I am. You taught me that. I'm Esther Hartwell, healer in training. And I love you. That's the truth. And I'm done hiding truth to make cruel people comfortable. Josh kissed her, then gentle and reverent, like she was something precious he'd been afraid to touch. It wasn't passionate or dramatic, just real and true and right. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Josh rested his forehead against hers. I love you too. Have for weeks, maybe longer. I just didn't think I deserved... Stop. She pressed her fingers to his lips. No more don't deserve. We both deserve happiness. We both deserve love. We both deserve lives that aren't defined by other people's fear and judgment. You're right. He pulled her close, and she rested her head against his chest, hearing his heartbeat strong and steady. When did you get so wise? You taught me. Through every lesson about medicine, every patient we treated, every time you refused to let me apologize for existing. You taught me that healing isn't just fixing what's broken, it's learning to live whole. They stood like that as the sun moved across the sky, two people who'd found each other in the wilderness of pain and judgment and emerged on the other side, transformed. Over the next 6 months, their relationship deepened while their practice grew. They treated patients from 3 counties, trained 2 more apprentices. Young women Martha sent up who needed purpose more than judgment, and built a reputation that even Paulson's continued sermons couldn't undermine. On a spring morning, exactly 1 year after Esther first climbed that mountain, Josh proposed. Not with a ring, they couldn't afford that, but with a promise. Marry me. Not because convention demands it, but because I want to spend my life partnered with you in every way. As colleagues, as friends, as lovers. Build this practice together. Train healers together. Grow old together. What do you say?" Esther said yes. They married quietly with Martha and Helen as witnesses, Sheriff Coleman performing the ceremony in the cabin that had become their home. No church, no crowd, no Paulson glowering in the back row. Just people who loved them, celebrating love that had grown from desperate hope into permanent choice. 5 years later, Esther passed her licensing examination with the highest marks in territorial history. Dr. Esther Whitman opened her own practice, still on Copper Mountain, still serving people. Other doctors had dismissed, but now with full legal authority to do so. Lucy Davies became her first official apprentice, having recovered so completely from her leg injury that she hiked mountain trails without hesitation. Samuel Porter grew into a healthy teenager who wanted to study medicine like the doctors who'd saved his life. And Ann Porter, when asked by new patients what kind of doctors the Whitmans were, would smile and say, "The kind who see people, not problems. The kind who believe suffering isn't sin. The kind who taught us all that healing happens when someone cares enough to look past what's broken to what's possible." Reverend Paulson eventually left Timber Creek, his congregation dwindling as more people sought healing from doctors who saw them as worthy rather than damned. Dr. Pemberton retired early, his practice failing as patients chose competence over convenience, and on Copper Mountain, in a cabin that smelled of medicine and pine, two healers built a life together. Not perfect, not without struggles or setbacks or moments of doubt, but whole, real, true. Josh had been right that first day when Esther arrived, desperate and dying. She wasn't broken, she was wounded, and wounded heals. It had healed. She had healed. They had healed each other. And in that healing, they discovered something more powerful than any medicine in Josh's carefully labeled jars. The truth that people aren't defined by their scars, but by their courage to keep living. Despite them, that bodies deserve respect rather than shame, and that love, real love, sees past surfaces to the soul beneath, and says, "You, exactly as you are. That's who I choose." Years later, when young healers asked Esther how she'd become a doctor, despite everything against her, she would smile and tell them about a mountain, a desperate climb, and a man who'd demanded, "Show me your body," not to shame her, but to heal her. And she'd tell them the truth that changed her life. Healing isn't a miracle that happens to you. It's mercy. You choose to accept shared between souls, brave enough to look at each other's wounds and not turn away. That was medicine's deepest truth. That was love's greatest gift. And that was the legacy they built together, one healed heart at a time on a mountain where broken things learned to be whole again.